A farmer tills his field on a vintage red tractor. Title: Land Access. Two Pierce County farmers in a high tunnel full of seedlings in trays.
We are Katie and Mark Green of Wild Hair Organic Farm. We are located just outside of the city limits of Tacoma, Washington in the Puyallup River Valley.
This is our 9th year in business here. We grow veggies and chicken eggs and mostly sell everything through a CSA that's picked up right here at the farm.
I guess you'd call us self-taught. We were really fortunate to have a really wide range of mentor farms and mentor farmers along the way that we gathered skills from.
We were looking for property that was farmable, that we could begin a business on, and we ended up with a traditional home loan on a very small plot, small acreage, small house, and it happened to be adjacent to this larger, well-established farm. And while we were working for a different farm, we sort of built a relationship with our neighbors on this farmland and then started working for them. And after a couple of years managing their farm with them, we ended up leasing directly from them. And that was sort of how we got connected to that property.
I think at the time our only sense of a given was that we knew we had 4 acres that we might like to do a little something with someday. The previous owners were the ones that initiated the conversation. One fall, they let us know that they were approaching retirement and wanted to see if it was something that we were interested in, taking on as a trial run, perhaps leasing it, which is what we did for the first 2 years.
Mark drives the tractor down a bare road that's bordered by leafy green veggies on one side and grass on the other. He carefully inspects the ground as he goes. Hillary Ayton, Associate Director, Washington Farmland Trust.
Our mission is to sustain a future for farming in Washington state, and that involves both conserving some of our most threatened farmland in the state, as well as supporting the next generation and new generation of farmers on land access. We have 2 main programs for accomplishing our mission. One is our Farmland Conservation and Stewardship Program, where we work to conserve farmland in partnership with farmers and then steward it into the future. And then our Farm to Farmer program, which is our farmland access program, that is essentially a land linking program that supports new and beginning farmers with finding and getting onto land, often from a retiring farmer.
I think the first time I met the Farmland Trust, there was a group here in Pierce County, the Pierce County Ag Roundtable, and I think I would go to the meetings there, and they had representatives attend those meetings. I don't think we anticipated them having a role in our leasing of the property. We weren't, expecting to purchase the property, particularly early. But as soon as we started moving to lease, the sellers, the owners, made it very clear that the property was going to be conserved. And so they became part of that conversation right away.
Everybody, both us and the owners, they wanted this to happen. They wanted to make sure that the farm was going to be a viable farm going forward, and that they had people there that were going to be able to carry that forward. And we were very interested in being those people, both for reasons of our own, but also for the community that was, here rooting us on, and for being able to be good stewards of the land that's here, because it's a really special place.
One of the major barriers to land access that new and beginning farmers are currently facing in Washington state is land affordability, particularly as development pressure kind of constrains the amount of farmland that is still available. And then that has all been exacerbated during the COVID pandemic. We've seen land prices go up even further in rural communities and in farmland. So easements as a tool for land access helps bring that price down for the new farmer, while also making sure the retiring farmer is made whole. They get to keep their investment in the land, maintain that asset. It's a really critical tool for that succession.
Young farm workers squat and stoop in the rows, harvesting greens into buckets and zucchinis into boxes.
We had a bunch of roadblocks, but 2 big ones. And one of them was showing that the farm business itself was viable. And we were able to address that by leasing for a little bit. And so we had real numbers that we could take to lenders, and they could see that the business itself could pay for its bills. The other big thing we had standing in our way was a down payment on the property. Farmers don't end up with a big pile of cash that they can just say goodbye to. And the conservation easement played a big role in that. It took a giant percentage of the property value right off the top. And so the down payment would shrink, proportionally with that. And then the other thing we did to tackle that problem is the Farm Service Agency. They have a special loan program. It's a 50-45-5. Under certain circumstances, if you meet all of the criteria, the down payment shrinks down to 5%. And that put it in range, something we could work towards.
Silver streamers on fence posts wave in the breeze.
Because this was a simultaneous sale, one of the really important partners was the lender for the farmer, for Mark and Katie, that were buying the property, which was at the time called Northwest Farm Credit Services and now called Ag West. They were a really excellent partner to work with. They are aligned with the goals of supporting agricultural viability in Washington State, supporting new and beginning farmers, and having that alignment with a lender was really key to supporting the easement process and the farm succession process.
In his office, Jess Sarsfield, Relationship Manager, Ag West Farm Credit.
Mark and Katie were new customers to Ag West Farm Credit, and they were already leasing the farm. And so the timeline probably worked pretty well for them, even though it was a little longer than just closing without an easement. As new customers, we would have done due diligence on them, which includes court record searches, credit checks, and getting their financials and looking them overall as a business and individually. There was another lender involved in the transaction as well. And so we really had to all work towards closing on a very certain date, which did happen.
One of the tools that we use, we call it a simultaneous sale. So we're just buying the easement, but we line that up to happen at the same time at closing as the sale of the property from the retiring farmer to the new farmer. That is highly orchestrated. It can be quite complicated. We're also needing to work with whomever is financing the property purchase of the property itself. So the new farmer's financer, they are part of that conversation and negotiation as well. They have to provide their approvals and something called a subordination for the conservation easement to ensure it stays in place in perpetuity.
The lender has a security interest in the land if they have a loan on it. And the easement is going to need to be in a senior position to that security that the lender has. And subordinating is just the lender accepting that that easement is in a priority position to them, which is what the easement purchaser is going to need so that their interest is secured as well. And then there's always the possibility that the lender does not want to sign the easement and subordinate to that. So a good reason to talk to your lender early.
Every so often, something would come up and put the whole process back. Sometimes there was a hang-up with a conservation easement. Sometimes there was a hang-up with the FSA. Something would happen, and we'd be 6 weeks out over and over and over again. Does that seem right?
Yeah. There were times where it started to feel very tenuous and like it could absolutely not work out at any moment if for some reason one of those parties could not fulfill what they needed, or if we wouldn't be able to fulfill it for them.
Yeah. You could be 95% of the way through the process and then have nothing.
Yeah.
It took a long time, a lot longer than all of the people involved thought it would. I think that's how these things go.
However, we were very fortunate to have that level of advocacy and knowledge with the Farmland Trust.
Yeah.
There were folks that, were going to bat to make it all happen, and who had the knowledge of how all of that works and who they needed to get the signatures from, who it might help to call. Meanwhile, jumping through hoops that we didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
So we just kept on going and kept on submitting information and signatures and playing the game. But luckily we had wonderful people going to bat for us.
If I had to sum up to one of my customers what they needed to focus on when going through an easement process, get in touch with your lender early and really look at yourself as responsible for what needs to get done and understanding what needs to get done. There's going to be a whole slew of people that are going to be behind you and be working for you in this, but you're kind of that glue that connects all of those stakeholders together. And so being there, being responsive to all of the stakeholders and keeping open communication with them throughout the process is going to be important.
The land trust really can be a farmer or landowner's resource for navigating those steps in the process while connecting you with legal and financial resources to get your own guidance to help support your interests in the process. That land trust can really be the clearinghouse for those resources, as well as outlining what the process will look like and taking on the responsibility of facilitating that transaction to closing.
Little yellow flowers top a row of greens. A worker sets a wheelbarrow in place and bends down to harvest vegetables.
Yeah, I think I would have wanted to tell past us that give yourself a couple of years. Know that that's the timeline you're realistically working with. I think if we'd been able to express that to our previous landlords, if we'd been able to kind of get that in our minds that it's okay, this is really how long this takes, that would have been very helpful. Instead, we were kind of chasing, it month by month for a bit there, and it felt very, very stressful, and there was a lot of pressure. Not that that ever goes away, per se, but I think had I really understood that part early on, I would have treated those 2 years very differently.
Yeah. If you could know up front that it's going to take a long time, that will make you feel like you're not doing it wrong the whole way through. Yeah. And then I would also just tell myself, there's a lot of forms. There's a lot of paperwork. Just admit it up front and go with it, and don't be frustrated by it, because that's just unnecessary. That's a given.
Wild Hare Farm fan art, children's drawings of farm animals, and a sign, you are the radish farm around.
We were fortunate because the Farmland Trust would sometimes be a go-between between us and the sellers. They would offer some input or advice or tell folks how things have happened at other places where property changed hands. So they really, really, really helped, even just emotionally, be a buffer, and helped us all get on the same page. And so I think people who are going to go down this road just need to be ready for that, and look for opportunities to write as much stuff down, not make assumptions, and just get on the same page with all the parties as early as possible about the minutia.
On paper, it is, a lot of actual currency and exchange of title and document. Whereas behind all of that is a lot of circulation and exchange of emotional currency that you're constantly trying to, maintain as much clarity and respect and reverence while still trying to build with enthusiasm and keep your own chin up when it's difficult. Going through this transition to purchase our land is one of the most difficult things that we've ever done.
Definitely the most inspiring and exciting part is always being able to see the impact that our work really does have to actually helping Mark and Katie, or the new farmer, be on this ground and keep the farm in production. Being able to play a role that really has some kind of meaningful support for that farm succession, and helping landowners and farmers achieve their goals is definitely the highlight for us.
Definitely worth it. In hindsight, I can say that clearly.
100%.
And I hope to be able to continue saying that in hindsight for a few more decades.
Even in the process, it was worth the risk.
Yeah.
It was worth the chance it might happen the whole way through, because it was such a special opportunity.
Yeah.
Everybody had to come together to make happen.
Yeah.
So it was always worth it, but often hard.
One of the features of our conservation easement is that the Farmland Trust also has right of first refusal. And we have a daughter. We have no idea what she wants to be, in her life, or what she wants to do. We, certainly had the freedom to choose what we wanted to do as our livelihood, and we hope the same for her. But we have no idea if that will involve anything at all to do with our farm. And so knowing that the pressure is not on her individually to carry on whatever legacy of this farm and stewardship as an individual is a gift that, someday I think could be critical for our family and for her life. That gives me a lot of peace as a parent to know down the road.
Mark strolls a muddy service road lined with blackberries, a coffee cup in hand.
I think one bit of advice I would consider giving someone who wanted to look into conservation easement is that just think really carefully about what it entails. It's not just free money at the time of the purchase. You're giving something up, and it is a good fit for us. It matches our values perfectly, but you want to make sure that that's the case for you too. If you're going to sell the easement, if you're going to have your farmland conserved, make sure you're okay with the fact that it will never have the value you're selling that value off to get it in the first place.
Bark always says that, everybody's got an asterisk when it comes to like how it is that they pulled it off to become a farmer, or own land or whatever it is. And, our asterisk was not that we were born into a farming family with land. We did not have a particularly financially lucrative career prior to this to be able to invest our own money into this. What we had was a place and a group of people who really, really cared about the future of this farm, enough about who we were and what we stood for, to see it through. And that's a real gift.
Farm workers in single file push wheelbarrows down a path by a tilled plot. The vintage tractor sits at the edge, and the path leads towards rows of densely planted waist-high greens and tall leafy trees. This program was created thanks to generous funding from AgWest Farm Credit, Harborton Foundation, Land Trust Alliance, and Roundhouse Foundation. Logo for Oregon Agricultural Trust.